So today I'm going to demonstrate how to clean a pork loin. So you will each have in your baskets a half of a pork loin. Okay? These are common to what you would see in the grocery stores. A lot of times you don't find whole loins, you'll usually find half loins. Now with the half loin, there's a potential that you'll either have the pork butt end or you'll have the fresh ham end. The difference between the two is the pork butt end has an overlap of muscles. So there'll actually be an overlap of two muscles joining together. This end actually is the pork butt end because I've got a secondary muscle here that goes over top of this primary muscle. If you have the fresh ham end, it will be a solid mass of muscle with no overlap to them. Either way, the process is the same. A slight difference with this side, but it doesn't take a whole lot, and I'll show you during the demonstration. So what we want to do is we want to remove the fat cap that's on the pork loin. And you might be saying, well, I love the fat cap on the pork loin. That's great. And if you decide on your own time, if you get a pork loin in and you want to cut pork chops with leave the fat cap on, perfect, not a problem. This is a great exercise for you in order to practice on how to remove the skin from the pork loin, the fat from the pork loin, because we're going to do something similar to this when we do beef. This is a lot cheaper per pound than what that beef tenderloin is going to be. So I'd rather you practice your first initial fat removal from something cheaper, and then later you'll do it again with the beef, which is going to be more expensive. Okay. So the way this works is you're going to take your boning knife, you're going to find a space within your pork loin, using the tip of the blade, you're going to take and just go right up underneath the fat, kind of lifting up a little bit. Go as far as you can. Don't worry about if you don't go all the way, that's not a problem. And then what I'm going to do is now I'm going to have a slight upward angle, and I'm going to do this sawing motion and try to remove the fat that I can. Okay. Now that I've got this flap started, I'm going to take my blade, I'm going to turn it the other way, go where I started, hold on to the fat, and doing a sawing motion, lift up slightly with this sawing motion to remove more fat. Okay, so I want to try to remove the fat with trying to keep as much of the meat on the loin as possible. And this is the process that we do over the entire loin. So you see I've got an area here. I'm going to put the tip of the blade up underneath again. Go as far as I can with that little upward pull. Go the opposite way, lifting up while I am cutting to separate those out. And this is the exact same process you will do when you do the beef tenderloin in a couple of weeks. So the top of your piece you're going to work on, and don't worry about moving around, like this. It'd be tough. You don't want to go in this way, and this doesn't work because of the angle. So I'm going to turn it like so, and you do the same thing this way. I'm going through, lift up, remove the fat, get into here. I can go this way, and sometimes you'll find after a while, especially with smaller cuts, that you can go in and just do a trim one way, but you want a nice sharp blade to be able to skin that fat right off of there. And we want to try to keep as much of the meat as possible because this goes into our yield. So how much of this is edible portion as opposed to waste. Okay. We get onto the sides. A lot of these are pieces of fat, so you can go and trim it down. And I'm just kind of shaving it away using the tip of my blade as much as I can to get down through this. And that cleans this up. Do the same thing on the other side. I can take my blade and just run it against the fat here to trim that up, trying to keep as much of the fat on, as much of the meat on as I can. Now you'll see on this side, because I have this overlap, I'm starting to get into the other part of this muscle. So I've got to make a decision on where I'm going to just say, okay, I'm cutting this part. And so I'm going to go about right here. It looks about right. I got a little bit of fat here. I want to still trim up to get as much as I can. Knowing with this overlap, I am going to have a little bit of fat there. That's not a problem. So that's part of my waist. Now I see I got these little flecks of fat in here. I'm not worried about those because I'm going to probably take more meat than I am with the fat. And so a little bit is not going to hurt anything. I'm going to flip this over. The other underside, a lot of times you'll find is pretty good. There's no big things of fat. I'm not necessarily worried about that. So now I've got my pork loin trimmed up, ready to go for my next step. What you've got here then, as far as the fat, that's part of your waist that you'll weigh at the end. So the next thing you're going to do is determine what you want to do with this pork loin. So what you want to do is get your scale out, probably put some plastic wrap or a plate or something on the scale and zero it out. So that allows you to see how you're doing with the weighing, because what we're now going to do is cut portions. In this case, we're going to cut boneless pork chops. What I would like for you to do, at least for your recipe, is to cut 4-ounce boneless pork chops. And you're going to start and do your first cut. You're going to weigh it, see where you're at, if you need to add or subtract to it. And then your next cut, you can go a little wider, a little smaller, depending on where you're at. Now, for you cutting your pork chops, your chef's knife works just fine. Again, if you're doing this a lot, though, they do have that specialty knife that I'm going to use, and that's the scimitar. So the scimitar's only job is to cut steaks and chops. And so that's what I'm going to use to do my cutting here. And again, same thing. Again, I'm using the scimitar, but you can use your chef's knife. Go in, do your cut. Then you put it on your scale, and then you would continue the cutting. Okay. Again, that uniformity is really important. I want to show you a couple variations to this. So let's say you want to make a pork tenderloin sandwich. Well, a pork tenderloin, the sandwich is not from the tenderloin cut, it's from the loin. It's typically a boneless pork chop, but what they do is called a butterfly cut. So let's say I want to do that, standard size. What I'd first do is go halfway. I'd cut, but I don't cut all the way through. And then I do my secondary cut, which I cut through. And then what I do is I then take my knife and cut just a couple more times, press it out. Don't cut all the way through the pork, but this is what you call a butterfly chop. Now then this butterfly chop, you could take the meat mallet, pound it out to the thickness that you want, bread it, deep fry it, or pan fry it, and now you've got your pork tenderloin. So that is a butterfly cut. Another fun cut you could do, instead of doing just a regular chop, you can do an extra thick cut chop. And then you lay it on its side, and then with your boning knife, you do a horizontal cut, or what you do is you create a pocket. So you put the knife in, but you don't want to go all the way through. So my hand up top is kind of feeling where the tip of the blade is. And then what I do is I do a cut going this way inside, again, not breaking through. Take the blade out, put it back in, and then I do a cut the other way, all the way, but not going through the side. And so what I've done now is I've created this really cool pocket. I can take a filling, put it in a pastry bag, put the tip of the pastry bag into here, pipe it in, and now I can stuff this pork chop. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, you could take the filling and stuff it in by hand. It does take a little bit more work. Another variation to that is you can do that partial cut, but you want to be careful. Like with this one, instead of cutting like a butterfly, you would cut a partial. So I would cut in like so, and then I would open up this a little bit more by having this open, a little bit open space. Now you can actually put shredded cheese or diced apples or whatever, something. If it was too tough to put through a piping bag, you could manually put this in, and then you can use like a toothpick or something to keep it closed while you're cooking. Okay. Then with mine, I'm getting into this overlay. which is not a problem. Again, I can still cut my pork chops. You'll just notice that in that cut, you'll have a little bit of fat here, because that fat is where the separation, that's that subcutaneous fat that separates this muscle from this muscle. But again, you can still get a great pork chop out of your product here. Let the knife do the work. You get down towards the end. Sometimes they get a little crazy. Now again, I've got a little pork chop here. This one, I mean, you could do a little pork chop, or you could use this for scrap. You would, if you use it for scrap for like grinding, this would be waste. So it would get weighed with this, but then this goes in the garbage, right? Because there's nothing you can do about this. This goes for sausage making. So it's considered waste because you're not making a pork chop out of it, but it does have value, and you would do value different ways. But you'll learn about this type of value, waste value, when you take cost control class. All right. So for you, what I'd like you to do is do your cuts for your 4-ounce pork chops, and then whatever waste you have, that gets weighed out for your yield sheet. So you've got your boneless pork chops set up. And again, I need you to do at least 2 of the pork chops. You want to do a few more. If you want to practice a butterfly, or you want to practice a pocket and put that in your video, you are more than welcome to. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the demonstration for butchering the pork loin.